And we're live.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the dreaded, long-delayed Groovy Podcast. Podcasting from Marlborough, Connecticut. My name is Ken Cousin, and I'm joined, as always, by, why don't you do it?
Yeah, I'm Baruch Sadogorski, and I'm broadcasting to you today from Franklin, Tennessee.
Wait, Franklin, Tennessee?
Yep, Franklin, Tennessee.
No, sorry. You can't just drop that and let that pass. I need some explanation there. What happened? You're still at J Frog, though, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, okay.
COVID happened, the pandemic happened, working from home happened. And it's not that I've been to the office like a lot, even pre-COVID days, but now there is really no reason to hang around in a driving distance to your office. I mean, I don't need to tell you, right? You live wherever you want to live, which happened to be Marlborough, Connecticut.
I moved to Connecticut way back in the late 80s and married a local girl. I'm stuck, man. I'm not going anywhere.
But you don't have an office to go to.
Yeah, you just need to be near a major airport, or at least you used to. I assume that'll happen again in the not too distant future.
We hope so. We definitely hope so. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely the idea. And since we are either working from home or on the road, there is really no reason to have an office nearby. Did some research and looks like we found a place that we like. Well, not this week, but hopefully the rest of it. So here we are. We moved last week. Still some boxes around. I managed to do the fireplace, and the flamingo is here as well. So,
the move last week?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Very recently. Okay. See, we needed that as an excuse for why we didn't have a podcast,
Oh, absolutely. I wasn't available because I was moving. For sure. Blame it on me. That sounds like the right thing to do.
So I guess you'll be using Nashville's airport. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. You'll spend a lot of time there then.
And they're renovating it for me right now, so it all works out. Yeah.
Are they a hub for anybody?
Southwest, like what they called, like a master city or whatever they call. But I mean, it's a short hop to Chicago and everything else. So
okay, it's just a lot to wrap my head around. I just don't picture you as a country music star. I mean, if that's the next thing that happens, is you wind up leaving the podcast. Well, of course, you could leverage the podcast for your country music career. So what do I know, I suppose?
Right. I mean, it cannot get much worse. That's what you're meaning. You're right.
How's now what's going on news-wise at the moment is that there's a deep freeze down in the southeastern part of the U.S. I mean, Texas is suffering badly with their infrastructure collapsing under the power problems, and so is Florida, from what I hear. But I keep seeing tweets from people in Texas. How are you doing in Tennessee?
Yeah, so it's pretty cold. It's like 10 degrees today, so it's pretty cold. But from what I heard when I spoke with the electric company guys here on a different topic, they mentioned that Tennessee is drastically overproducing for their own needs. So I don't expect any problems with power today. So far, everything runs smoothly. We have electricity, we have internet. As you can see, we only have we have heating. I mean, no complaints. It's white outside, which is nice to see through the window. So no complaints, really.
We have issues like that. Of course, we expect them. It's not like people down in Texas who just don't understand anything about cold or snow. I mean, we've got a backup generator, we've got a snowplow, we've got all that stuff. And the only thing I feel sympathy for them, partly because they're suffering and partly because we're getting their weather in a day or two. I mean, it's on its way. So we actually came close to 50 degrees Fahrenheit today. That won't last, unfortunately. We've got more snow coming. So, all right, maybe we should talk about something groovy related. What do you think?
Absolutely. The only thing that I want to do before we actually start is make sure that we are tweeting our broadcast.
Oh, you think we can get people to join in, or do you?
Yeah, we're doing StreamYard. It can highlight comments. It can bring them on a screen. It's pretty nice. So I want us to make sure that people are aware and come and chat with us. So that
Okay,
was the
well,
title of the week.
we'll see if that works out. So feel free to put in that. While you're doing that, I'll just mention that we do have new releases for that we'll talk about with Groovy and Grails and Gradle and many others. As a matter of fact, Micronaut, of course, and I know Spock 2.0 is on its way. They're up to milestone 4 now. I don't know what the plan is, how many milestones they plan, or how many release candidates if they decide to go that way. I've been using Spock 2.0 in its milestone version in a few of my projects. Have you had a chance to do any of that, by the way?
No, not really. So I just followed the news, but I didn't play with it. No.
For me, the big difference is that now it's based on JUnit 5 rather than 4. So no more run with. It's now, at least I don't think so. It's used as a with along with all the extra capabilities that JUnit 5 brings to the table. They're able to leverage all of that, which I really like. So I've been using it in some of my projects, and in fact, I've been using Groovy 4, rather Spock 2 and Spock 1 kind of, or I'm running the old tests with the new tests all in the same structure, which meant I had to include both the JUnit 5 and 4 dependencies. So I'm sure all that'll be ironed out before they actually release, but so far so good. That actually reminds me of something I wanted to mention. Let's see, it's way down in the show notes. We should mention, if you want to see the show notes in general, there is a GitHub organization. So under github.com, you go to Groovy-podcast, and then the actual repo is called Groovy Podcast without the dash, all inside that. So under github.com/Groovy-podcast/Groovy Podcast, you'll find the latest show notes. We are currently episode 81, which we have arbitrarily labeled season 4, episode 7. I wonder if this should have been the first episode of season 5. What do you think?
Yeah, it looks like so by the break that we took.
Yeah,
It
so
feels like a new season. Yep.
okay, I'll update the notes to make that season 5, episode 1. You could put that in there when we upload and make it sound like this is a big deal.
It is a big deal. For 5
Hopefully
episodes, it is.
And hopefully we can get it on a more regular basis now. I mean, I feel that we were somewhat shamed into this, of course, based on comments from, let's see, I heard something from Cedric, of course, Champeau, and then he's not the one who triggered it all. It was, let's see, who bugged me about it?
Yeah, there was like tweet or was it
Yeah, Cedric
what the
definitely
hell?
said something.
Yeah, what the hell are we thinking? Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and he's right. You know that. I mean, it's the pace of change is not dramatic right now in those communities, but still, this has been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and we have topics to talk about, not just the list of the release notes, but actually a couple of interesting things occurred in our community that definitely worth
Yeah, the one
talking
thing.
about.
The one thing I was going to mention, though, before we dive into all that, is good old GreatConf. You know that we've both been to the European version. Of course, everything is still basically shut down in terms of live conferences these days. They decided not to do a live conference, but for the past few months, they've been running what they call a GreatConf Friday bar, and in that, let's see if I go to that site. Basically, it's a tech talk and social event. There's like a 30-minute talk. The last one was a few weeks ago. It was on, they actually had somebody talking about Spock 2, unfortunately, and I wasn't able to stay very long because I had to teach a training class that started. See, it's all in the European time zones, okay? So it was very awkward time for me. It was right in the middle of my day, and when I went to join it, I was only able to stay for like half an hour, and then I had to leave to teach a class that involves a language that I won't mention at the moment.
Might it start with the K?
It might, yes, in fact. And I almost said something about that, but that seemed... What's that?
Starts with a K and ends with Otlin, and it took us 8 minutes to mention Kotlin for the first time in this episode.
I didn't say it. I really didn't. I was trying to avoid it, but
Oh yeah, nice try, nice try.
I just couldn't bring myself to say in the chat room at that last Friday bar that, I have to go leave and teach a Kotlin class now. I couldn't bring myself to do it. That was
You didn't
just
say
wrong.
JVM language.
Yeah.
That'd
Now,
be
on the
groovy.
other hand, Now, by the way, the reason I'm bringing up that Friday bar, let me finally finish what I was going to say about that. The next one is this Friday. I mean, it's this week. It's January 22nd. January 22nd? Oh, the page is old. The page they have there is old. There's one this Friday, however, and I think it's Soren tweets about it on a regular basis. Shoot. So the link I have in the show notes is the one on the one for the last one, apparently. So I'm trying to see if I can find it. Well, while you're talking about something, I'll see if I can find that. But I know it's in the Apache Groovy feed as well, right? Don't they tweet? Oh, there it is. Actually, that's the one I linked to, and it was from the last one. But they'll be having a new one this Friday. So all you have to do is check out I think it's SB Glasius is his Twitter feed, right?
Yep.
Yes, and you'd think I'd have this prepared a little better.
No, it wouldn't be our podcast if we had this prepared. I mean, we
Yeah.
need to maintain a level of.
His last one is the same one, but at any rate, he will tweet about it in the next couple of days again. And I'm sure if you just search for GR8 Conf Friday Bar, you'll find it, and that way you can get an invite and you can join it if you like. So at any rate, that's something I wanted to mention as long as we had a moment.
Yep. So definitely worth attending. Do you know if they're already doing it in this Clubhouse thing or?
No, not Clubhouse. I can't do Clubhouse. I have an Android phone. I don't have an iPhone.
Same here.
Oh, well, I mean, it's interesting to watch the rise of things like that right now, especially an exclusive one, because that generates all that FOMO, the fear.
Yeah, exactly.
And yet, you hear all these
of...
people going, most of those are really boring. And I mean, who listens to things like podcasts anymore, right? I mean,
yeah. No, I mean, we have 3 listeners by now. I think I'm one of them, so 2, but that's okay.
Well, they say, I mean, Twitter did to text. The analogy I heard was that Twitter kind of destroyed blogs, because instead of having to create a whole blog post, you could just tweet a stream of consciousness, and it basically used it up. It certainly made it so I blog far less frequently. I don't tweet a lot anyway, but when I do, it's that way.
You have a mailing list. Come on.
Right. So, but then the idea is that Clubhouse, in principle, is supposed to do the same thing to podcasts. Because remember, when we got involved in this podcast, there weren't that many podcasts around. And now, geez, I mean, is it everybody, certainly every white male age 35 to 50 or something has a podcast or whatever. I'm not sure what the rule is, but it's a huge number. And the thing about Clubhouse, again, is that you don't have to, it's not high production values. Now, of course, if you want low production values, you've come to the right place. So we're all set.
Right here in Groovy Podcast without even need to use Clubhouse.
Right. So if we eventually have to open up something there, we will, and we'll see what happens. Okay. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with Groovy releases? Do you want to start with tweets or the blog posts? Or what do you feel like?
We can go by the order of the show notes. I mean, this is what we always done.
Okay. Well, geez, you remember back that far? I'm not sure. At any rate,
it's just there. It's just there.
Groovy is firmly established as Groovy 3 at this point, and they're up to 3.0.7 now, and that's been out since at least December. But I mean, 3.0 has been out far longer than that. I've seen several presentations on new features in Groovy. I mean, heck, I wrote an article about it a couple of years ago, but there are way newer things available than that. And the release notes actually now, one thing I do want to mention, and I have a link to it in the show notes, is that Paul King, the inimitable Paul King, did a presentation at ApacheCon, and all the Groovy track presentations from ApacheCon are in a YouTube playlist that we have linked in our show notes, but he's got the slides up specifically for the Groovy roadmap, as he calls it. So the Groovy roadmap talks about all the features in Groovy 3 and discusses what's coming in Groovy 4 as well, which is just amazing to see that we're already talking about Groovy 4 as well, and how it's being supported by the Open Collective and all. He's got all the download numbers and everything. Supposedly in 2019 they were talking about 197 million downloads, and in 2020 half of the year they'd had about 147 million. So it was going up and up. Of course, this brings up other false measures of success, like you saw the Tiobe index came out again.
Yep. And so, it's as strange as always.
I gotta say, I just don't understand that index. I mean, I look at it because, hey, you know, it's data. It's not necessarily useful data, but it's data. I'm trying to see where that was. I had a page open to that thing. I think I got so sick of it, I killed it. So, I mean, the good thing about it, of course, is that Groovy is steadily in the early teens. I mean, I think it was, people were saying, hey, how cool is this? Groovy's at like a number 12. Conveniently forgetting that on the previous one, so for February 2021, that's what I have. February 2021, it's at Groovy's at number 12. Of course, the last index was about 3 months ago or something like that. Yeah. It was at 11. Yeah. So, I mean, but that's not really the weird part. The weird part is that this time there was a change at the top. I mean, Java fell to second place behind C. And I mean, has C even had a release in years? I mean, who are all these C coders? I don't get it.
I think they do this back and forth between Java and C for a very long time, the first and second. And but there is still like a massive market for applications which can only be written in C or maybe in Rust, but it's kind of still early days for Rust.
But compared to Java, compared to Python these days, compared to JavaScript, I mean, C is all the way at the top. I mean, I get it that it's the language for the Unix operating system, and that's what was its original claim to fame and everything. But have you met anybody whose primary day job is writing C code? I don't mean C++. I just mean regular, straight C code.
I guess there are a lot of developers who write C, but yeah, it's kind of weird that it claims the first place.
I haven't met one in years. Heck, assembly language is number 10. It's like, well, okay. Then behind Groovy is Go and Ruby and Swift, and okay, and then MATLAB of all things, and then Delphi, Object Pascal. It's like, come on, really? Classic, Visual Basic, Perl, Objective-C. Oh, I heard a Perl joke. Did I give you this one yet?
No.
A million monkeys typing on a million typewriters will eventually type a Java program.
Right.
And the rest will be Perl programs.
Right. One-liners, Perl one-liners, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking for up-and-coming languages, I mean, obviously Kotlin and Scala and Clojure, all the normal JVM alternative languages are all healthy these days. Rust, of course, is rising in adoption, and I've heard very good things about Julia of all things, especially in the numerical processing areas, which are hot for AI and machine learning. Of course, that's still Python, but then they, maybe that's where the C coders are, because the Python stuff compiles down to C in order to get any speed, doesn't it? I mean, Python's not a compiled language, but the executables they make, I think, work with C. I wonder if that has something to do with it. I'm probably completely wrong. Of course, any index that has Fortran at number 23, I'm like, okay, let's move on.
Yeah, no, it's a weird one, but I think they have a lot of complaints about each and every one of them, so
Yeah, well, it's still nice to see Groovy as in the forefront. At least people are aware of it. It's still coming around. I have to say that I'm actually starting to get preliminary feelers to ask about Groovy training again, and it's been a while since I've heard a lot from that. I still haven't heard much. Now, again, I'm a single data point, so I'm not a good measure of these things. But it seems that just going on and keeping on the way Groovy keeps on indefinitely will eventually start attracting more attention again. I just, as someone who is actively involved with Kotlin, I still find it amusing to watch them discover things that Groovy added 5-10 years ago, delegates and things like that. I'm like, oh, come on, but at any rate, there's that. How about Grails on the other hand? Oh, by the way, did you want to say anything about Groovy 4 or not?
Well, it's I mean, it's nice to see how it moves forward, right? Somewhere about, you remember the transition to Apache and all this stuff. There was a very long stagnant period that it was stuck on 2.5 forever, and we were like, will 3 even be out? And then like this, 3 is out, and now 4 is in alpha, and this is
Well, I
great.
mean, Groovy 3, the biggest contribution there were a lot of small things like the Elvis assignment and the not in and various other operators. There was the big thing for me was the support for all of the Java syntax features. The ability to use Lambda syntax from Java inside Groovy or method reference syntax from Java inside Groovy was very helpful. And it makes the transition for regular Java developers to Groovy that much easier. The fact that they can take advantage of that is really nice. And of course, they had many other things. The parrot parser, which was part of that transition, was very, very useful code, and being able to do default methods and interfaces and try with resources. All these things that were familiar to Java people are now available in Groovy. Now, one of the issues that still comes up in Java is that the Java platform module system, the JPMS support, and Groovy's still got a couple of split packages that lead to warnings. And from what I understand, one of the things that's coming in, it could very well be in the next long-term support release of Java 17 coming out in September, is that suddenly those warnings are going to become errors, that they actually are finally going to say, yeah, you can't do that anymore. And Groovy did a lot of resolution of that in 3. I know that in 4 they're going to get rid of all those problems so that you won't get any.
And that was a major kind of barrier for further adoption of Groovy. People tried it and they saw like a bunch of errors and warnings in the logs, and they're like, okay, this is crap, I cannot work with it. Then go to some other weird languages, the other ones.
Yes.
So cleaning up those warning is definitely critical. Yep.
Yeah, and they're gonna upgrade. They're gonna switch the coordinates so it'll no longer have the word codehouse in it. They'll use org.apache.groovy and they'll upgrade all the internal stuff. But when I'm looking through this at the new features that they have in mind, I think it will support Java records, which are part of Java now, but a part that is rarely used because, well, a couple of reasons. One is that you have to go beyond the current long-term support release of Java to use them. I mean, Java 11 doesn't have records. Records don't show up until 14, I think. And the current version is 15. By the time we do another podcast, it'll be 16, But the other big problem with records is that the JSON parsers, the major ones like JSON and Moshi and a few others, don't work with records correctly. Now, Groovy, of course, again, something it has over some of these other languages, has a built-in JSON parser and a slurper that works very well with these things, but still being able to support Java records will be a nice feather in its cap, and they're going to have a record type and more. So there's a lot of other things that are being added, but of course, that's long in the future on all of that. So again, I recommend that if you get a chance to take a look at Paul's slides for the Groovy 3 highlights and the 4 roadmap. It's always interesting. And hey, if Paul says it, that's what's going on. He's the guy making most of those. Oh, I missed a feature, of course. The big thing that Daniel's son is always working on is was it Jinq support, GINQ? Right, are you familiar with that at all?
No, I don't think so. Jinq, no.
Oh yeah, Daniel does a lot of tweets about this and talks about Jink as, let's see if I've got this link here. I suppose I'll have to add it, but it basically is more or less, it feels like a DSL for SQL, pretty much, so that you can write GQ, and that starts off this Jink block, if you will, and you've got terms like from and join and where and limit and select. And when you write this code in SQL, oh, hey, we got a visitor. You're going to greet that person? You know? So at any rate, when you write this code in Groovy in a DSL form, it basically is executing SQL appropriately. And you can process data sources and do filtering and all kinds of nice features in it. So I noticed Daniel's been working hard on that, and I'm sure that'll be part of Groovy 4. The question is, will the Groovy Jink module, which it's in now, will that be built into part of Groovy 3 at some point? Oh, apparently Jink stands for Groovy Integrated Query. I didn't know that. So,
and it will probably go into 4, if anything.
Well, definitely in 4, but it may be an option that you can include prior to that. It says you can query, in addition to SQL, you can query XML and JSON, and my goodness, you can query freaking YAML. You believe it?
Yeah. Groovy is a modern DevOps language. Of course, it should be able
and they'll be able to
YAML.
do that before Java can even.
That's very true.
Yeah, right. All that stuff. Okay, so at any rate, I wanted to bring that up because I mean Daniel works really hard on that, and we definitely should mention that as well. Okay, so we've got the links to the upcoming releases, and of course Keegan Witt, we should also mention, produces those Windows installers for those people still sentenced to using Windows.
Well, Windows today is not what Windows used to be.
Yeah, well, that's true. I do have one Surface tablet that uses Windows. You know how you always name your computer on the network, right? I mean, I hope you come up with clever names, right?
Oh, always, yeah.
Yeah. You know what that computer is named on my network?
How it's called?
It's called Client Made Me Use Windows. That's the actual name of the computer. I couldn't think of anything better. So, at any rate, I've worked with that, you know. But there's Windows installers that Keegan Witt puts together, and there's links to that. Although I think I linked just directly to the tweet that he put about it, so you can go find them if you want. Okay, moving on to the Grails community, and then we'll get back to Gradle in a minute. Grails is currently at 4.0.7, so Grails 4 has been around for a little while. It's moving. It's pretty stable at this point, is the sense I get. That you're not talking about radical changes. Moving from Grails 3 to Grails 4 is very easy. Moving from Grails 2 to 3 was a big deal because the project structure changed and they adopted Gradle as the build tool. And, you know, it involves some serious improvements, but it did involve some changes. But moving from 3 to 4 has been, from what I understand, pretty much trivial. And of course, now they have a tag page for Groovy 5 release. I haven't noticed any significant changes planned even. But if you're interested in what's going on in that community, I think we got the link to the town hall. Yes. So OCI periodically holds what they call a 2GM town hall meeting. 2GM presumably being Groovy, Grails, and Micronaut. And Micronaut. Yep. So in the town hall, we've got a link to the first one from 2021, and I've got the slides here. And when they discuss the state of Grails, they've got a Grails Night now, KNIGHT, which they're supposedly holding a competition to try to name that night. And I haven't come up with anything clever yet. I'm sure you'll be submitting something there, right? At any rate, the only thing to mention there, Grails 2 is end of life June 30th of this year in terms of support. And Grails 3, in principle, they say will be end of life in September, believe it or not. So they're going to want to go with 4 and 5.
Which is, again, like we see the same, right? 2 to 3 was painful, but from there it just runs.
Right. And of course, they're upgrading all the build tools. So, I mean, all these support libraries, that'll use, Grails 5 will definitely use Groovy 3. I'm not sure Grails 4 does yet. I think it's still on either 4 or 5. I forget how they played it. But Grails 5 will definitely be on Groovy 3 and Gradle 6, of course, which we'll get to in a moment. They're also upgrading to Spring and Spring Boot. Spring Boot is 2.4, so that's Spring 5.3. That'll use Spock 2 when it's available, and so on. And of course, oh geez, now let's not. There was a big problem in the Grails community having to do with something associated with JFrog, but I don't think we're quite ready for that discussion yet.
No, we are. Let's have this discussion.
Should we talk about Gradle first and then come back to that, or not?
It's all related. Let's talk about Gradle, then come back to that, and we'll talk about Bintray and JCenter. Yep.
Okay. So the thing that happens, Gradle, of course, is on this pretty frequent release schedule, and they're up to 6.8.2 at this point. But I have not had a radical reevaluation of Gradle changes recently. Actually, that's really not true. Let's put it this way. Gradle's been pretty good about backward compatibility. The newest feature that they added, I think in 6.7, was the Java toolchain support. I really like the toolchain support. You can actually say in your Gradle build file which Java version you want, and it searches your machine in all the normal places to see if it could find it. And if it can't, it even offers to download one. And you can now in 6.8, you could even say which vendor you wanted to download. I mean, adopt OpenJDK or one of the others, very easily. I'm waiting to see how often this is used. Now, the only place I use it seriously is I do a class on what's new in Java. So that one has to run on Java 15, etc. And of course, my regular day-to-day Java is 11, the current long-term support release. And I always have to switch my Java version in my console in order to run a Gradle build that does that. Well, now I don't have to. I can just say, hey, in this Java toolchain, use Java 15. And I already have a Java 15 from SDK Man, the awesome SDK Man. And yes, it just uses it automatically. So I really
think about another use case, which I think kind of more what they catered for, and that will be SCI, right? So think about the build that runs, on a container, and there is nothing in there. You don't have to use base Java container anymore. Just take the simplest, the smallest container, and then say, or you might run the one with Java on it, and then you should just say, if you find the Java, fine. If not, just download it. And that goes back to the same idea that in order to build successfully a Gradle project, all you need to do is clone a Git repository. You have no dependency for Gradle itself, since we have the wrapper, which basically since day one, now we don't have dependencies on Java as well. Either you save some time downloading it if you already have it on your machine, but if not, Gradle will do the right thing.
Well, that's not quite true. You still have to install Java before you run Gradle. But you don't have to install the Java that Gradle needs. Gradle will go and download a different Java if your project requires it. So, yes, I mean, I agree with you. And the CI server application, of course, is, I don't know why I didn't think of that. That's excellent. Another thing, though, I do have to mention about Gradle is I have actually had to undergo a bit of a conversion myself on Gradle. I don't write ad hoc tasks very often. I know better than that. But I've always been taught about the life cycle, the difference between the configuration time and the execution time, which was always so critical in a Gradle build. Well, now there has been an adjustment that when you work with tasks, you use tasks plural .named or .register to create a task, .named to look one up, and both of those are lazy rather than eager. So when you define your own task in an ad hoc sense, it's automatically eager. It has to instantiate the associated class and configure it. But with .named and .register, they're lazy again. And therefore, if you don't need that task, it will save you instantiation and configuration.
And this story brings us right into the conversation between Bruce Eckel and Cedric Champeau about the problem with Gradle.
Okay, so let's bring that up. So there's a link in the show notes.
Yeah, if you missed it somehow, and I bet you didn't because it was a big deal, Bruce Eccles, the one and only, the dear friend of all the community and all of us, the author of Thinking in Java and then Thinking in Scala, the one of the organizers of the Java Posse Roundup that became the Winter Tech Forum, the Bruce Eccles, wrote a blog post about the problem with Gradle.
Right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the main point of that was, gee, it's complicated. And I don't want to get into the details of dependency management and software building. Instead, I just want the right code and I want my build tool to just work.
Well, there were a couple things going on. First of all, from my point of view, Bruce Eckel was a giant name because when I was in engineering and converting to software development, my first Java book where anything made any sense at all was the original Thinking in Java. I mean, that first edition, went through 4 editions and badly needs 5 or 6, but that first edition of Thinking in Java was the book that made the difference for me. So, of course, I've always been aware of Bruce Eckel, even though he seemed to leave the field and I never heard anything from him again. So when he's writing this post, that got my attention. Secondly, it's a long post, but there's a couple of things that jump out immediately. One is that he's comparing basically to Makefiles. I mean, he's not comparing to Maven. He's not comparing to Basel. He's not comparing to other major enterprise quality build tools. He's comparing to Make, and he's used to writing Python code with Makefiles. And I'm like, really? This is your comparison? But not just that, the running theme, and of course he's a writer, so he's going to come up with some theme, even if it's not necessarily completely applicable, if it just sounds good. And the statement that he would use over and over again is, in order to do anything, you have to know everything. That's the phrase. Now, of course, anything absolute like that is going to be wrong. I mean, any statement, just like the one I just made, that's going to have to be wrong, right? I mean, if it's an absolute statement, that's an oversimplification. But I get it. I mean, I used to say in the early days of Gradle, I never saw a project with so much documentation that didn't help, where you couldn't wrap your head around what was going on because you had to know so many pieces. Of course, if you compare it to other APIs like Android, where you have to know everything to know anything, it's really not that bad. But that was I understand the frustration that there's a serious learning curve and there's a lot of traps for the unwary in Gradle. Although the thing is that the mistakes he was making, the performance things he was talking about, really didn't seem like they were that big a deal. But okay, they were there. And I mean, I could spend an hour with him and I think he'd be fine.
Here is the difference from Android. When you write about Android, you need to know everything about in order to do anything. But this is your job, right? You are an Android developer. You dig into it and then you do it. Now, except of the build engineers or infrastructure engineers or platform engineers, call them whatever you like, most of the people are not. Gradle or build in general is not their job. What they want to do is get started real simple and have their project built. And if they're working with other people, collaborate around this project, make sure that the structure of the project and the structure of the build is easy and understandable, and then be able to contribute to that.
And of course, that's exactly right. Of course, that's exactly what I mean. We're not talking about people who are specializing in Gradle. We're talking about people who are writing whatever they're writing. And I need a way to do this. But here's the thing. This ties into another problem that I always had, and that was, and not for my own learning, but for teaching it to other people, because I still do teach the intro Gradle class for Gradle Inc. every other month. And the question always comes up, do I have to learn Groovy in order to do Gradle? Or if they're doing the Kotlin DSL, do I have to learn Kotlin in order to do Gradle? But of course, there's overwhelming numbers of Groovy build files out there. We use the Groovy DSL. And the answer was always no, but yes. I mean, no, technically, if you're able to stick with the DSL and do everything that Gradle does right out of the box and use the really well documented plugins that show examples that do exactly what you want. I mean, if you're the sort of person who copy and paste code from Stack Overflow, maybe you'll be fine. But if you, I mean, Gradle's, one of Gradle's biggest features is its customization, its ability to adapt to changing circumstances. And of course, that sooner or later is going to involve some Groovy understanding. And it was little Groovy things that were throwing off Bruce Eckel, like the fact that strings could be single quoted or double quoted, and it would work either way unless you put in an interpolation, and then it was a problem. And you could have parentheses or not have parentheses. I mean, all sorts of things that are Groovy features that you get used to really fast were causing him problems because there were too many choices. And I get that. That happens to Gradle beginners all the time. So I always say, you can avoid it.
The point is, most of the people shouldn't be more than Gradle beginners, right? And this is something I've been speaking with Hans endlessly, and with Cedric, and with everybody in Gradle. Do a fucking simple mode. Seriously, do a simple mode. We understand how the customization, the DSL, the ability to fall into Groovy, to write task, to customize everything, how it is important for power users. But your entire community, your entire market, your entire target audience are by definition are not advanced users, and probably won't ever be, because they don't want to be advanced users of the build. It's dear to Hans' heart, it's dear to Cedric's heart, it's dear to your and my heart. This is pretty much it. But Bruce Eckel.
How much do you blame Gradle for that? And how much do you blame the fact that Groovy's just that flexible and that there's a learning curve? You do have to learn some Groovy. Now, the Kotlin one, the DSL, there's a lot fewer choices. And some people like that, but there's also a lot of other limitations that come with switching to that language,
But Gradle itself can limit what can and cannot be used inside their DSL.
Well,
you can fail
people at Gradle, of course. And one of the things they're doing is that they are emphasizing the syntax that works under both DSLs. They're emphasizing the concepts that work under both DSLs. This idea of named versus register and all of those other concepts. If you stick with that sort of code, it works either way. And that's useful. But, there's always the idea that on any technology you use, you should know one layer below the technology. Like if you're using Hibernate, you should know something about SQL. You can't just do object relational mapping and pretend you don't know anything about database.
Yes, but again, this is on a different level. This is for a different domain. When you work with Hibernate, you are expected to know about object relational mapping. When I have a project as a developer that I want to add a dependency or do something similar and simple, I don't expect myself spending 3 days in the documentation trying to figure out how you do it. And here is exactly where Maven hits the sweet spot, something that we were completely blind for many years, when we said, well, Maven is horrible, it's limiting you so much. All you can do is produce one jar file, and the project structure is still the same and everything. But this limitation actually is a blessing for most of the developers out there that want to know that when they see a POM file, they know everything they need to know. They know the structure of the project, they know where to add their dependencies, they know where the artifacts come from. Surprisingly, those limitations are a huge benefit. And I think that Gradle can have the best of two worlds. With this simple mode, you can switch between, we are working for developers who don't want to understand build. All we see is like a very simple structure that you can add modules or add dependencies and do other couple of basic stuff, maybe connect plugins from a trusted source. And then you can unleash the endless flexibility of Gradle and Groovy and the DSL and everything by a flip of a switch for the power users, administrators, build engineers, and who's not.
Well, to give you an example, I mean, I'm still on the somewhat functional no fluff just stuff conference tour, even though there are no conferences, you know. And back when we used to have our conferences, we'd have this, what I used to call the go up and pretend to be an expert panel. It was called an expert panel, but you know, and sometimes the issue of Gradle versus Maven would come up, and we would talk about it. And we did have one person on the tour who often said that they went back to Maven. Now, after we accused them of Stockholm syndrome, of course, you know, the reason was exactly as you said. The advantage is that there were so fewer choices. It's the, what is it, paradox of choice, you know, when there are too many choices to do, people don't want to do anything. The problem, of course, is that Maven is highly opinionated. And if you don't do things the way it wants to do them, sooner or later, you're going to run into problems. The person who would be the person to talk to about all this, of course, would be Andres Almireg. He's an expert in both. Now, of course, we do have to acknowledge that as soon as this blog post came out, I figured a timer started, and it was just a question before somebody from Gradle responded to all this. And sure enough, shortly after that, Cedric Champeau wrote his blog post entitled "The Problem with Gradle." Really? ? Which is like, okay, do we really want to be somewhat sarcastic? And you know, that's not the way you want to treat your users, you know. But I didn't go through the whole post, but a lot of it simply comes down to, look, this is a hard problem. I'm sorry. Yes, it's you're expecting something to be trivially easy, and it will be trivially easy if you don't care about performance, you don't care about customization, and you don't care about getting dependencies correctly. You don't want to have to build an actual model for your software, if you will. But if you want to shave off milliseconds in performance and demonstrate incredible capabilities, then these issues have to be addressed. Now, I'm not sure how that addressed them. I'm not sure whether Bruce Eckel was even aware of that post. I chose not to follow up. He posted the discussion on Reddit, of all places, which is like, really? Okay. And not just on Reddit, in the Kotlin forum, not in the Gradle forum, but in the Kotlin forum. And I think the reason he did is Eckel was working with Svetlana Isakova, one of the founders of JetBrains, you know, one of the major players there. They're working on a book on Kotlin. So, of course, he was dealing with his build files because of Kotlin, and, you know, that's probably why he posted it there. But, you know, the discussion went on, and then Reddit discussions degenerated, and I kind of abandoned it.
Which kind of, again, highlights the point, right? Yeah. He was writing a book about Kotlin. Mm-hmm. He should have zero friction with building his pretty basic examples for the book, right? What do you expect? You don't expect a complicated project for examples of the book. And he got frustrated with Gradle to a level that he wrote this blog post, right?
That's true. And that is meaningful. I mean, that's exactly what the Gradle people should care about, is that somebody who could have been one of their great advocates, who could have represented them as an intelligent user not in the community, could have come out and said, wow, this thing did everything I needed to do right away, and instead had to spend so much time thinking about Gradle that he felt obligated to write a post like that. And that is a problem. And I don't know that I don't know what response would fix that. I'm not sure if Gradle can fix that. We're just going to have to keep an eye on that.
Simple mode will fix it for everybody.
Well, simple mode. So you'll talk to Hans again, I suppose.
That will be our conversation number 20 on the subject.
We should move on. Now we've got...
Which bring us, wait a second, we have a segue after segue right here. It's just amazing. It's like we planned the whole thing. Which bring us to our next topic, and this is obviously I'm criticizing Gradle as a very big fan and a very big friend, and I hope a true member of the community that really hurts for what should have been a dominating build tool in the JVM industry. Unfortunately, it's not. We can see surveys of the industry, for example, done by JetBrains, and you see how Maven is still dominant by a large margin, 70% of the projects, and this kind of stuff. And this obviously hurts for me personally, and for JFrog as being very big friends for Gradle. And that brings us to the next topic, and that's JCenter. And the mutual friendship between JFrog and Gradle goes way back. Back to 2012, when we actually started Bintray and JCenter, and Gradle were one of the first who kind of believed in us and say, hey, this should be the better Maven Central, and we are incorporating JCenter as the top level concept in our DSL on par with Maven Central, so you can use that instead. And our bet when we came up with JCenter was on Gradle, that will become soon, any day now, the dominant, by large dominant, the build tool in the JVM. And this is where our friendship will take to new heights. And unfortunately, I really mean unfortunately, like I really suffer that that's what's going on. That didn't happen.
Well, so explain the actual issue here. Now, it was this.
Yeah.
It was announced in a tweet, right? Go ahead.
Yeah. So the actual issue here is that on May 1st, JFrog is shutting down bunch of I would say services. Bintray is one of them, JCenter is the other, and that will be the topic of our conversation in a sec, but also right. GoCenter and Helm Center. Right. So it will affect to an extent Gradle users and Groovy community and Grails community, and we're going to talk about that in a sec. But first, let me kind of go back and explain what happened, why this is happening. This is not because we are evil or trying to do harm. I believe that that's for the opposite reason. And to understand how can it even be, we need to go back, as I mentioned, to 2012. Back then, we released a service which was complementary to JFrog Artifactory back then and targeted a distribution scenario. So Artifactory, you use it for CI time, right? When you have artifacts that you promote through your pipeline, and then in the end of the day, you need to put them in production. It is done in different ways. Sometimes you push them to your own servers or to the cloud, but sometimes there are distribution scenarios which people need to download the software. Like, you download your JVM or Groovy or anything like that. And this is and back then, obviously, the cloud was less prominent, so there was much more demand for this kind of stuff. And one of the features, the very nice features of Bintray was the ability to include your packages into other people's repositories. And what it means is that if, for example, a community like Gradle or Grails want to maintain their own ecosystem or central repository for plugins, for example, they can create an official canonical repository on Bintray, and then us as contributors will have our own space on Bintray on which we will play around and make sure that everything's good, and then we will ask for an inclusion into canonical repository. They on their side will check that everything looks good and eventually grant us the being in the official canonical repository, where the users will download from there, usually in automatic manner, hidden by CLI or something like that. That was the idea. And one of the use cases for this system was actually JCenter. What we said in JFrog is, hey, there are two ways to do central repositories. There is NPM registry, which is a bazaar, and everybody can deploy whatever they like there. And if you will search for hello world in NPM registry, your mind will explode. You'll find hundreds of packages hello world just because why not? The other extreme of that is obviously Maven Central, right, which is very hard to get to, but you can expect a certain level of quality and canonicality out of there. And we said, hey, there is a middle way. We can do Bintray, which will be open for everybody to play around, and then people will ask to be included in JCenter when they're ready. We will verify their integrity, and then we'll let them in. So JCenter will be this better Maven Center. And as I mentioned, Gradle did a leap of faith, adopting JCenter very, very early, for which we are obviously forever grateful. But there was a problem competing with Maven Central. And the problem competing with Maven Central was obviously that Maven Central is built into or baked into Maven rather deeply. If we speak about the level of usage of build tools that we just mentioned, for the people who are not experts in build tools, for them replacing a repository in Maven was a not trivial task, right? You and me, we can say, well, it's just a couple of lines in settings XML, and it can be, the settings XML can be in different places, and we can name the places in which it can be, and then there is a Maven wrapper. It's not official, but you can dig it up. And I mean, it's not a rocket science, but again, whoever is doing the build don't really care. They run Maven, MVN clean install, as Andres Armours will probably appreciate. And next thing you know, it works, and it works through Maven Central. And
so
this
if
is
it
where,
worked and it was so popular, why turn it off?
right. So this is where our leap of faith from our side in Gradle taking over Maven very, very soon will actually help in converting Maven as being JCenter as being the canonical repository of Java. As we know, that didn't help. Now, in parallel, we decided that we want to provide other communities with similar services. So Go, for example, released a modular support a year and a half ago. Before that, there was no official modules in Go, and then they released the Go modules. And Go modules in the beginning didn't have any repository at all, like any central repository. And it was obviously a pain because you had to check out from version control the sources of all your modules, build them locally on your machine into packages, and only then you can use them. And we said, hey, doesn't make sense. We know how to do it better. Here's Go Center, a central repository for Go modules. You don't need to do anything, just use it and we'll be fine. A couple of months after we released it, Google said, you know what? We can do a central repository as well. Here is our Go proxy, and it will be baked into Go executable, exactly like Maven Central is baked into Maven. And then it happened again with Chart Center. We said, hey, Helm, as a package manager for Kubernetes, don't have a central repository. It has a bunch of different repositories. It's very annoying. Let us do a service for the community. Here is a central repository. You can point your Helm to one place and get all the packages. Next thing we know, a couple of months after, CNCF releases an official aggregated Helm repository. And this is where kind of the penny dropped. If we are not the owners of the community, if you wish, trying to create this repository time and time again also only creates fragmentation. Because people now don't know, should we use JFrog repository? Should we use the Maven Central repository, or a Go Center, or a Go Proxy, a Chart Center, or the official CNCF repository? It creates a lot of segmentation. And we saw that with JCenter as well. A lot of people, most of the people, the vast majority of the people use JCenter not as the real canonical repository, but it's just a way to get to Maven Central easier, because publishing to Maven Central is a pain. Going through JCenter is a very easy route to do. We take care of all the stuff on their side. And while Bintray ceased to provide JFrog the right commercial benefits, because JFrog platform now includes much more powerful distribution tools than Bintray ever had, the centers became the valuable service that we had to evaluate, and we came to the decision that it's better to kind of step back and say, hey, with Go, you go with Google, with Helm, you go with NCF, with Java, you go with whoever still owns the market for Java libraries, which is Maven, and because the tight connection within Maven Center.
Well, wait, are you saying that had Gradle taken over the industry, if the numbers were 70-30 Gradle versus Maven reversed, I mean, the Gradle was the dominant one, you would have stuck with it? I mean, that kind of contradicted it. You said that, I mean, it sounds like that you're saying that it wasn't worth the expense when it wasn't the dominant source, and why have two sources instead of one, especially when yours is being treated as a front end on the other? Was it a financial issue? Was it that you didn't, are you basically saying you don't think that Gradle will become the dominant tool? And also, what drove it to be now? What suddenly said, you know what, we're announcing this in January, you're done by May? Because a lot of people panicked because
let's talk about
they didn't have enough time in all this. So that's where I'm going.
All those are great questions. Let me try and answer them. I cannot guarantee that my answers will be enough, or that you will say, hey, you did the right thing, and we obviously can agree to disagree on that. But sure, I think it's important to kind of try and explain our way of thinking behind it. Okay. Consider JCenter, not Bintray. Bintray is okay. Bintray is a product that did its purpose and now is replaced with a better functionality on other platforms. This is fine. Now consider JCenter as an experiment that ran for 8 years, from December 2012 to December 2020. In this experiment, we really wanted it to become the canonical center for Java packages, because it is superior technically and in a mode of operandus than Maven Central. And we still believe that. Now, after 8 years, sometimes you need to stop and you say, okay, this experiment is not succeeding. People still prefer Maven Central for resolution because of Maven, because they prefer Maven, and because Maven just works with Maven Central. And because of that, people still prefer Maven Central for deployment, although it's nice that they use JCenter to get to Maven Central. That was not the goal of it. We provided this thing as to see it becoming like a legacy support. Yes, we want to be on JCenter first, but it also will be nice to be in Maven Central. And here we have a way to do it. But what it is used now for the majority of people is the other way around, is that people just want to get to Maven Central, and JCenter is this utility to allow them to go there easier, which is great. I mean, I'm glad that its service is useful, but it's not what JCenter was supposed to ever be.
Okay.
Now, for the timelines and the urgency, I think we had, and I'm still not sure what happened. The dates on the official blog post were completely off. So first, and we fixed it. And I don't know, I would like to take a credit and say, hey, we got the response from the community and fixed it, but frankly, it was weird. We didn't need to consult the community to see that they're off. The resolution from JCenter will continue as it is for at least another year, for all the way to March 2022. Uh, we will see what's need to be done when we get closer to that, but people will have all the time in the world to gracefully migrate the resolution, the consumption from JCenter to Maven Central. And obviously it will require support by tools, and I expect next version of Gradle, for example, to deprecate JCenter as an instruction in their DSL. But in the end of the day, I would say here is enough to for most of the projects, except maybe of abundant one, but most of the projects to migrate. So this is for consumption. Now, publishing ends earlier, but still it ends in May. So it gives people more than a quarter to change their build script for the active project. And I expect whoever publishes software is pretty active. So that should work. So yeah, we corrected the timelines, and now they make more sense, and I feel more comfortable with them.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, and I don't mean this to be accusatory or to be an argument or anything.
No,
like
you
that.
should. I mean, you should give me shit, and you should keep me honest.
Well, it was a big deal in the community, and it definitely feels like something has been lost. That's something that was easy. Now, I got to be honest. I don't publish libraries. I just consume them. I use them. So for me, switching my Gradle build to go replacing JCenter with Maven Central is a global search and replace. It's not really going to affect me in a big way, especially if I've got over a year to do it. But for people who published, this is a big deal. And for people like in the Grails community, which, as you say, had hosted their own system for the Grails plugins, all intimately bound to this JCenter idea, this seemed to come out of nowhere and really felt like a problem. And I guess the question is, was this driven by financial considerations? Is this, the experiment not being, you're talking about an experiment that contradicts the financial issue, because if Gradle had become the definitive one, or if JCenter had become the definitive one, you would have had tons more traffic. And wouldn't the expenses have gone up then?
That's why I didn't say that traffic was the problem.
Okay.
And
okay.
I
so
still
it's
say it's not. It's not.
Okay.
I mean, it's...
So you just don't want the fragmentation in the industry, but fragmentation...
It's both. Okay, so you know how it's okay to spend money that something works, and it's not okay to spend money on something that doesn't work? Does it make sense?
Sure.
Right. So, and this is, I think, where we are. When in some point of time we need to stop spending money on an experiment that didn't work.
Well, there's an easy resolution. You just either Gradle needs to buy JFrog, or the other way around,
Absolutely.
Or both of you can be bought by whoever is running Maven.
Oh yeah. So the type, absolutely. They
yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't see two options as a problem, but I get it. If you're saying you don't want to be the definitive host for Gradle, well, I guess if Gradle, apparently they don't want to be the definitive host either. Yeah, we're going to have to see. In other words, it sounds to me like the situation is likely to change, and we'll have to see how it plays out over the next few months. So I don't want to take too much time on this. We've already spent, we did spend a good amount of time, which we needed to. That's definitely true. But the podcast is already getting relatively long, and I'm expecting that we will get replies, that if anybody actually does listen to this podcast, we may actually get feedback this time.
We do have feedback. We do have feedback. And I would say the first kind of, let me highlight it, from Tucker, that's kind of the feedback from our conversation. And he mentions here, for whoever don't watch us live, and you should, because now we play with comments and all this cool stuff.
Yeah.
He mentioned that he published a few libraries, and obviously it's a pain to publish to Maven Central. Yes, and we acknowledge that. And we acknowledge that taking away this nice tool of getting to Maven Central through JCenter is a pain. Yes, and we apologize for taking it away. It was never JCenter's intention.
Okay.
Right? I mean,
so in other words, what I'm trying to say is let's determine that today's discussion, we've said about what we can say about it, and let's see what feedback we get and whether there's anything. Do you want to remove the comment from the page there? And then we will address this on our next podcast. In fact, this is a driver for us to definitely have another podcast relative in a timely fashion. So we'll see. Okay. And maybe we can get somebody who's affected by this or something to come and talk on the podcast as well. So let's leave that. Now there's other things in the list, but again, we've gotten long here. So what I do want to address, the one thing that we do want to talk about is something that I didn't find a good way to add to the show notes, and hopefully you'll either come up with something or we'll see something else. But we have to mention Russell, of course.
Yeah.
So do you want me to start with that, or do you want to say something?
Yeah. No, you go ahead. I think we have pretty much the same relationship to Russell.
Yeah. I mean, many people were aware that the Groovy community lost one of its major contributors, a person that really mattered, a person who made a lot of contributions to the community. And I, unfortunately, again, I never did see an obituary, so I don't have the exact dates or anything like that, but poor Russell Winder was lost to, I believe it was a form of cancer back in, I think it was December, wasn't it? Yeah, so it was about a month ago. And Russell has made many contributions to the Groovy community, among many other things. He was a very bright guy. He had an academic background and yet a very practical one as well. He has many talks. There are many YouTube videos of him giving talks throughout the industry. He had a very English, very dry sense of humor that was always a joy to listen to. You'll find YouTube recordings of him around. From my point of view, what I always thought of when I thought of Russell was the Jeepers project, GPARS, the
Yes.
Groovy Parallel Systems libraries, which he basically was the driving force behind. And I felt that project never got the love that it deserved, the respect. I mean, he did a wonderful job with that, doing concurrency before concurrency was cool, where everybody's thinking about it now. And he was very clever about doing all these things. And it's just very sad to lose someone, especially someone so young as Russell. So for those who are thinking about Russell, we want to give you our best. We, of course, are thinking about him as well. And I'm very sorry to see him go. I wish I'd had a chance to know him better. I only attended a few conferences where I just ran into him once or twice. I never really got a good chance to sit down with him. And yet everybody who did was just all over Twitter and blogs posting about how wonderful a person he was and how much they enjoyed their interactions with him. And just very sad to see that happen. So we express our condolences to the family and friends and anyone who knew Russell Winder, and hopefully if we could find some good summary somewhere that talks about his career in a little bit more detail and everything, we will add it to our show notes. We'll bring it up next time. I don't know if it's been long enough for that to appear online yet. Did you have anything else you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, no, I think that summarized it very, very well, and the majority of us know Russell by GPARS, which speaks for his brilliance, and yeah, I second everything you said, and it's a huge loss. I was acquainted with him in the community, but I was under the same impression that he's brilliant, nice, friendly, a truly valuable member of and contributor to the community. And
I mean, I think it speaks well of the Groovy community that it attracts people like that. I mean, I often talk about one of the best features of Groovy is that the community is so warm and friendly and yet so humble. I mean, you get really brilliant people who you'd never know it until you talk to them. You know, they're not good at self-publicity, which in a way holds Groovy back, but they're such a joy to be around, and they're so helpful. People like Paul King, like Guillaume Laforge, like well, just a whole host of people as well. Graham Roche, who's now at Oracle. It's another thing we didn't talk about, but, you know, Graham as well. You know, you just get, I'd like to believe that one of the nice features of this language and this ecosystem is that it attracts people who like being supportive and helpful and nice and warm to everyone around them. And Russell just ticked off every one of those boxes. Just such a great person. And Guillaume, I think, was the one who tweeted the original message about losing him. And if maybe we can get a chance to have Guillaume come by and say something about him next time. Okay, is there, I mean, I don't want to leave on a down note, although I'd really like to celebrate what he's done, you know, and especially the work that he did. Is there anything you want to bring up in the show notes that we have? Anything in addition to that? I mean, what are you working on?
I think we might not get through entire show notes because we have
I think we're good, right?
Couple of huge topics to talk about,
which we knew.
That would be maybe for us something that will help us release the next episode sooner that we have left over from today. No guarantees, as usual. You might very well find yourself starting season 6 by the next time. Hopefully not.
So, well, just to ask, is there anything you're working on, anywhere you're going, anything I mean, usually we talk about what your conferences are, but of course that's not happening. Are you dealing with DevNexus at all tomorrow? Are you dealing with anything else or not?
Yeah. So tomorrow is DevNexus. I have a talk there, so I'll be in the chat. The talk is recording, but you know, it is what it is. DevNexus and a bunch of meetups and virtual conferences that it's not even fun to talk about.
On my side, of course, I'm still doing a lot with the O'Reilly Learning Platform. I'm still giving talks occasionally. I'm arranging talks for the Great Indian Developer Summit, the one coming in April as well. I will not be at DevNexus. I'll just be attending. I'll just be watching some of that. I am going to go to that Great Conf Friday bar this week. I'm working on a book that's almost finished. It got renamed. I don't know if I mentioned. It was called Managing Your Manager book. Apparently, you can't do SEO on that well. You know, I don't know. So the new name apparently is going to be Help Your Boss Help You. Okay. You know, it works. I mean, we'll see. And by the time we have another podcast, it's possible that book may be out in beta form, at which point I'll talk about it then. But
okay, let's talk about our books next, because I will mention the book that I'm writing I'm co-writing, most of the writing done by others, DevOps Tools for Java Developers. And that was a great promotion for our next episode.
Very
Till
good.
then, we are like insane hour and 17 minutes. We should stop.
Yeah, I think we've covered enough. And there are other things in the show notes. If you're interested, feel free to take a look. And of course, we're both available on Twitter or by email, any other way you want to get in touch with us. Thank you all, everybody who listened through this, and we hope to see you again sometime soon, I hope. Thank you very much. Anything else, Baruch, or are we good?
That will be all for us for today, and hopefully next episode less than 3 months away. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Take care.